Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von hinten an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
A jolly episode.
Joey, the only reason I have to smile is your company, I'm going to be honest. Anyway, welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I'm joined by Joey and Brian. How are you guys doing? Happy holidays to all our listeners, but more importantly, happy holidays to the other Dortmund Dispatch hosts.
We did. Happy holidays all around. It's been busy, but holidays are always busy, but it was a good busy, so looking forward to ringing in the new year and getting back into routines a little bit, though.
Yeah, the two gentlemen I'm talking to right now, you know, they spent Christmas with their fiancés and their families. I spent Christmas with my wonderful dog, Valerie. It's all the same, guys. I'm glad you laughed at that one. Anyway, what we have for you today is the Borussia Dortmund Hinrunde Roundup. We're going to start off by rating the first half of the season 1 to 10. And do I get to cop out and go last? Brian, you put this in. Let's hear what you have to say first.
Yeah, you can go last. It's all good. No one's going to judge you for that one. Considering I did put this together, yeah, sure. So...
Still buying time?
I'm not buying time. I have my answer. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to articulate it. So, as considering the situation, considering the last couple seasons where we finished in the league, taking all that into context, I did put it as a 7 overall, simply because we are in second. When's the last time that was the case for an extended period of time? And, you know, the team is playing with some semblance of cohesion. Obviously, things aren't perfect, but the results haven't been to the point where it's been, you know, where, like, for example, where we were last season, where we were kind of starting to feel fatalistic at this point under Nuri Sahin. So, I mean, that was kind of my reasoning for putting it as a 7, you know. We are getting results, despite them maybe not always being the exact result that we want, but at least it's not as bad as it was. So, context included, 7 out of 10 for me.
I think that's a very fair assessment of the situation. And I went back and forth on this a little bit. My notebook, I had 7 down and then I had 6 down, and I think I'm going to settle at 6.5. I'm going to meet in the middle there. I mean, I kind of think, you know, if we're looking at a phenomenal season being a 10 out of 10, we did have the trio of losses against pretty good teams, but there are a lot of draws in there. And I think given everything that Brian said, I do agree that overall the team looks like about a 7 out of 10. But I had to kind of give a bit of a deduction for the cup exit, because I do think that in itself is disappointing and potentially harms Dortmund's chances of trying to re-sign players. And, you know, I know not everybody loves the cup, but unfortunately it is the most realistic chance of a trophy every season. I know Dortmund's in second place in the league right now, which is great, but I think we're still like 9 points behind Bayern Munich, and that's a steep mountain to climb. So I'm going with 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, completely fair. I mean, listen, yeah, the cup at the end of the day, like you said, Joey, is the most realistic trophy for Dortmund to win. And I think that's kind of like what took it away. It took, you know, obviously some points away from me as well. You know, not having that as an option this year, or any year for that matter, should be considered a failure for Dortmund. So yeah, I fully agree with that.
Yeah, so I think the way to look at it is like the results are at a 7. If you just look at every game, you take out the competition, we've lost some games that we probably shouldn't have, like that Leverkusen match. And then you have some draws where you kind of threw it away, like Juventus, and then some of the the Hamburg game comes to mind, and then some of the more recent bad results. Was it against Hamburg? Like the results, 7 or 8 out of 10 overall. Some bad ones in there, but overall it's pretty good. But just in terms of like the watchability of the football, like Borussia Dortmund in recent years have been known for their attacking football, and that's where I'd take a point off. So I'll go 6. So we can say 6-7 for the algorithm. But we can quickly move on because we're all full grown adults, except for Joey, who actually laughed at that. Very surprising. But let's. Oh God! For our audio only listeners, Joey did the 6-7 meme thing.
Brian joined me.
Oh God! I am the youngest one in the call, so let's move on. We have our favorite and least favorite performance of the Hinrunde. Brian, can you give me your favorite and least favorite?
So this was kind of tough for me. I kind of had a couple in mind. The 2-0 against Mainz comes to mind as a good performance because it's a clean sheet. We were 2-0 up by the half, and it was a fairly commanding performance. The win over Leverkusen obviously is a good result because, at the end of the day, Leverkusen is one of the top teams in the league, and it was one of the bigger tests that we had to face. We did pass that one. Unfortunately, not in the cup, but in the league. And then the other game that came to mind for me was the loss against Bayern, which it feels weird to say, but at the same time, when you do watch that game, and I feel like I've said this a couple times over the course of like our podcast this season, I still think that was one of the better performances that we had because second half we did look like the better team, the more threatening team, not counting Joe Bellingham's boneheaded moment there. But overall, we were the more threatening team, and we looked the more likely team to score. And we did have them on the back foot at times. So for that to be the case, I do want to think of those three as, I guess, like my top 3 performances. Least favorite would probably have to be the first week, the 3-3 against St. Pauli, simply because I feel like it set the tone for some of the performances to come. And granted, I mean, yeah, that was a very like high scoring draw, and obviously, in my opinion, shouldn't have been a thing in the first place. But I do think that it showed some of the issues that we've seen kind of continue as the season has gone on. So that would probably be my least favorite.
I think that's fair. I'm going to start with least favorite, and then we can go on to the more positive side. I kind of went back and forth on this between the 3-3 draw against Stuttgart and the 4-4 against Juventus, mostly because of how frustrating those matches were in the moment. And I ended up settling on the 4-4 draw with Juventus because Dortmund were ahead in that match at three different times. And we went into stoppage time ahead 4-2 and conceded twice. And I mean, there were just all kinds of problems in the back half of that game. Poor subs, missed passes, bad tackles. It it was just a frustrating match to watch. So that one is definitely my least favorite. Because I do think there are some positives to take away from the 3 losses this season. Like Brian mentioned, in much of the Bayern game, we did look like the better side. And like always, I do think that officiating was, not kind to Dortmund in that match. Um, I also think that in the loss to Leverkusen, we also looked like the better team, and unfortunately, that just doesn't always mean that the better team doesn't always win, is what I'm trying to say. And I do think that we had some redeeming qualities in the Manchester City match too. And I mean, they certainly outplayed us comprehensively, but there were a couple points in later in the second half where we kind of came back and got a goal. And also in the opening stages, if I remember correctly, before we conceded that first goal. So I do think like we had some redeeming qualities in those, but in that watching that Juventus match, it was just so frustrating. Like many of the draws have been this season. In terms of my favorite match of the Hinrunde, it's got to be the 2-1 over Leverkusen. And I think the main reason that that one's my favorite match is because, this new fan club I've gotten up and running in Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, North Carolina. We had a pretty good turnout for that match, and we'd already gotten together and watched a couple losses and um, a few draws, and this was the first like really big win that I felt like we experienced as a watch party. And I mean, it was right after Thanksgiving, so there were family members there. We befriended some folks who were already at the boot room in Durham having a meeting for their Charlotte FC fan club, and we just kind of got like a whole bunch of people cheering for Dortmund in our venue. So that was just a fun match to watch, and it was tense until the final whistle. So yeah, that 2-1 win over Leverkusen was definitely my favorite. How about you, Eli?
So I'd have to go with the same favorite result, the 2-1 win over Leverkusen, but there's two matches I was kind of in between for my least favorite that you guys haven't really mentioned at all. And we did win one of them against Augsburg. That was the worst win I have ever experienced as a Borussia Dortmund fan. There was, like, that match was just scratching my eyes out for 90 minutes. And when you take into context how bad Augsburg are this season. And like the next match I'm about to talk about, we fully deserve to win, except for one player on the other team having an exceptional day at the office, in Dennis Undev. But like the performance of this result was actually pretty good. The scoreline obviously ended in a draw, and so it was the most heartbreaking. So I have to say it's like my least favorite result. But my least favorite performance is definitely that Augsburg game. But the Stuttgart match, like that match, oh my god, it was so disappointing because that was some of the best football we've played all season.
Yeah, I mean, that match in particular kind of outlined some of our defensive issues once again. I mean, like there were some moments where we were fairly lazy. I mean, even we can even say that a couple of the goals that went in were even on our best defender, Nico Schlotterbeck. So I mean, yeah, I mean, considering I think we took the lead in that game a couple times as well, to
I
see
think it was
that
all
kind of
three.
or all three times, yeah, like yeah, it's insane to see that slip three times in a game. So yeah, I feel that. I feel that.
Okay, so now we are going to move on to our Rückrunde wish list, something we would like to see change for Borussia Dortmund in 2026.
I mean, my ask is fairly simple, and that's just to see more rotation and earlier subs from Niko Kovac. I feel we've been banging this drum all season, and not even just this season. I feel like the last couple like coaches that we've have had this trend of really waiting until like the last second to implement subs. And when they do implement the subs, it's not always subs that we understand, obviously. Defer to them as the experts. But like at the end of the day, like there are times where, for example, you can clearly see that something isn't working or specific players just aren't performing. And I feel like as a whole, Kovac really waits a very long time to make those subs. And I think there a lot of the matches that we've mentioned that were draws or losses or anything like that, the result could have been changed if the changes had been made sooner. Because when players had come on, they looked fresh. I mean, when I think of players, I mean the times that Karim Adeyemi has come off the bench, or Fabio Silva, or even Maxi Bayer. There have been moments where I feel like given just a little bit more time, they could have made more of an impact. So I feel like moving forward, that's something that I like to see more of, and more positive substitutions. I wouldn't want it to be like a defensive, move when we're chasing a game or something like that. I feel like we've seen that a couple times, and it has like it's kind of left me scratching my head. So I mean, overall, yeah, it's that. Obviously, I want players like Silva to get more minutes. Obviously, not calling for the guy to start necessarily, but I do think that him, Bayer, and other players can offer more given more time. And I think the players, as we've seen, even with Julian Brandt, I mean, he comes in a lot now as a sub, or is rotated a lot, and he's been doing so much better, in my opinion. So I feel like, given the opportunity to give players some rests when they're not performing, and giving these other players more minutes to perform, we could start seeing a little bit more positive results moving forward.
Well, I'm glad that you wished for all of that so that I don't have to also wish for it right now because I think those are more than reasonable asks. Um, I definitely have been left scratching my head and confused on multiple occasions by many of Kovac's subs, and I think a lot of the time they do come too late. Um, and he can be a bit too conservative with those one goal advantages, as we've seen many times how that doesn't really it's not working. I mean, it's great that we're not losing many matches, but we really need to be able to hold on to those wins. I think my wish list is pretty simple and straightforward. Um, and honestly, I'm hoping that this wish list is completed before January is up, and that's um, putting pen to paper and getting new contracts for Nico Schlotterbeck, Kareem Adeyemi, and Julian Brandt. Um, Especially Schlotterbeck and Adeyemi, because I think we need to make a statement moving forward. If Dortmund wants to challenge for titles, then why not come out of the Rick Runda, come out in the second half swinging. And I think we can make a big statement by getting a guy like Nico Schlotterbeck on a new contract before the first match of the restart. Um, and then we can start to build a squad around a player like Nico Schlotterbeck or, a guy like Kareem Adeyemi who might be there a long time should we get him on another contract. And let's find some reinforcements for the squad who can complement the guys who are committed to being there a long time and the guys who we know are going to be starters for the foreseeable future. So that's kind of my ask. I know we'll get into some transfer rumors in a little bit, but um, before we get into signing more players, I really think come on, Sebastian Kiel, you're listening to the Dortmund Dispatch, right? Get these guys on new contracts. Like let's let's get to work. Come on.
If only it were that simple, I feel like.
I know, right?
Yeah, Brian talked about it a little. My wish is just going to be a 60-30 rotation, but it's 60-30 of the strikers. So, like, whoever's starting striker, you're getting 60 minutes. You're not seeing out the match. I don't care who it is. I don't care. Garassi, you want to throw a fit about it, you're gone in the summer. Anyway, like, you're already basically asking with your brother every week talking about Saudi, Saudi, Saudi. Like, this is what's happening. This is what's best for the team. So Maxi Bayer's on 6 goals and assists in the Bundesliga. You know who else is on 6 goals, 6 assists? Or 6 goals and assists? Serge Guirassy. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe let's put Maxi Bayer up front. He's obviously not been the same as Guirassy in the Champions League. But, Maxi Bayer hasn't missed 2 penalties this season. I'll put it that way. Let's let the boy rock up front. Like, he's been a striker his entire career until he came to Borussia Dortmund. Let's let him. Let's see what happens. Like, you never know.
I'd love to
let's
see
move
it.
on, and let's go with the star of the Hinrunde. And I've been going last. I'm going first now, and there's only one way I'm going with this, and it's not going to be my number one favorite player to watch in Kareem Adeyemi. But it is going to be a player that I have talked about positively when some other people maybe didn't. And that's going to be Julian Brandt. The people said he was washed. I was not the people. I always believed in this guy. Is Julian Brandt perfect? No. Absolutely not. But, he's human, and he's a very good football player. And he's kind of changed his game a little bit. He's way over his skis on XG, but, he's also historically one of the best finishers in Europe over the last 15 years. So, like, is he going to finish with double his XG next year? No. But he's done it so far this year, and it's a big part of why Borussia Dortmund are in second, because without those goals, um, that's pretty big difference right there, 4 goals. Um, but yeah, Julian Brandt's having a tremendous season, his best season in a long time, and he is on pace for his fourth or fifth straight season with 20 plus goals and assists in all competitions, and that's just special. And he's only 2 goal contributions behind Garassi, despite having more expected assists. He has less assists, but that's whatever. Like, basically, Julian Brandt has been the difference maker. Grassi's been up and down. He's kind of played poorly at times, and he's played very, very well in that one stretch to start the season. But Brent has been very consistent and hasn't really complained, hasn't kicked up a fuss or anything, just consistently done his job and done it very well.
Brian, you want to go next?
So unselfish there.
I mean, I was gonna let you go, but yeah, sure, I can definitely go next. I'm gonna go with a fairly simple answer, in my opinion, and that's Nico Schlotterbeck. Especially the first, I would say, two-thirds of this first half of the season. I would say, obviously, our best defender, and by and large, our best player. Um, has fallen off a little bit when we're talking about, I guess, the end of the Hinrunde, but I mean, at the end of the day, even I guess a little bit of a slip up for him isn't the biggest deal. I did mention we were talking about the Stuttgart game that perhaps he hasn't been flawless, but he's by and large been our best defender. His distribution once again this season is great, and he's been a leader for us. So I think he fits into this category quite well. So yeah, Schlotterbeck for me.
Well, I thought about changing my star to make it more interesting for the listeners, but I did put a bit of thought into this, and I'm gonna have to match Eli and saying that Julian Brandt is also my star of the Hinrunde. I mean, I think he's done more than enough to show that he deserves a new contract, and I mean, he's not necessarily the guy who's going to play 90 minutes every single match because we've seen the Julian Brandt that plays 90 minutes every 3 days, and that's the inconsistent Julian Brandt that we saw under Nuri Sahin, and at times under Edin Terzic. But I think Julian Brandt's form turned around completely when Kovac entered the picture last season, and in my view, he's gone from one of the more inconsistent players at Dortmund to the club's most consistent player. Um, and I have to give him the star for that because I think there have been a lot of questions that were asked of him at the beginning of the season, entering the last year of his contract, and I think he knew that if he was going to get a new contract, that he was going to need to perform, and he's been doing that. Start of the season, we saw him play a bit of a bench role, um, but when he was on the bench, he almost always came in and usually had some kind of impact. And was starting to think, okay, this Brandt from the bench is actually pretty darn good because when you have a fresh Julian Brandt, he's very creative. But then finishing out the Hinrunde in the form that he did was just kind of breathtaking, and he had a couple goals in this season so far where I mean the cross is coming in hot and he takes it out of the air and like calm, collected, right into the back of the net. And I do think that he's kind of he's making up the slack here at the end of the Hinrunde for our other attacking players who haven't been able to find the back of the net. So I think Brandt is kind of embraced his new role, not necessarily as much of the leader that the club wanted him to be, but when Julian Brandt is playing the support role, I think he can be one of the best midfielders in Europe. So Julian Brandt is my star.
That goal against Bayern underlines that.
Yep.
And Joey, who is your dud of the Hinrunde?
My dud is gonna be Seru Girassi. It mostly because at the wages that he's on, we've got to see better performances. And I think if I counted correctly, he has scored in 2 of his last 16 appearances for Dortmund, and
Or
that
yeah, he's 3 goals, 2 appearances he scored in.
yep, and that stretches back quite a ways now. And if he's not scoring, I find Gerassi's contributions in the match to be pretty minimal at times, and I mean he doesn't have a whole lot of pace, and his passing has frequently not been great. Um, and I just it's got to be better. Like this is supposed to be our star striker, but our star striker isn't scoring, and that's a problem. So unfortunately, I know he's been my dud several times uh in the podcast recently, but he's got to be my dud of the Hinrunde. Um, and a lot of that has to do with not just the lack of goals, but a lot of his like off the ball positioning or yeah, just his general play has not been great in support or hold up, and um, yeah, I think I've said about. I'm ranting now.
Yeah, I mean it's 8-20. It's not a short stretch we're talking about. Like this
Yep.
is basically a third of what we've seen from him, and 8-20 is like that's fine if you're like a relegation team, but that's a very long stretch for a guy whose total cost to the team based off his transfer fee, his wages, and his signing on bonus is basically like what 70% more than just about every other player like Nicolas Sula, who's slated for being so overpaid by Borussia Dortmund, came in on a free transfer, cost the club 10 million euros per season. Garassi's at about 17.5 million euros per season in terms of total cost, and he's not giving you 70% more than a lot of the other guys. Like obviously Sula's been hurt, so it's a bit of an unfair comparison on Sula there, but compared to a lot of other guys, like there's not 70% more. So I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, with him in particular, I mean, I feel like keep harping on this Bayern game, but that game was also a good example of what you guys are talking about, especially what Joey mentioned about, Guirassi's contributions when he's not scoring, which end up being somewhat minimal at times. I just remember seeing him mostly in the midfield in the first half, the ball awkwardly bouncing off of him when passes were coming in, or like him trying to float the ball forward and not reaching his target. And you just think that, yeah, like, and that's, I guess, where that whole rotation thing came from, too. What you were talking about, Eli. At the end of the day, maybe he just needs some time off the pitch. Maybe he needs a rest. Maybe we need to rotate and give these other players a chance. And I think this first half has underlined that I think it'd be okay to do so. But yeah, in terms of my dud, I'm going to go with Carney Chukwuemeka. Simply because just keeping it short and sweet, this is a talented player at the end of the day, right? But he's had to deal with injuries, and even when he has been injured, when he has come on, he's only shown, I guess, glimpses of what he is capable of. And again, we were talking about this in the chat, I guess for the fee that we paid, which once again is to no fault of his own, we paid what we did pay for him. You would hope that there'd be more of a contribution, especially considering the little glimmers we saw last season when he came on loan. You would hope that he'd be building on this. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened to this point. Not writing him off, but when it comes to performances and expectations, I would have expected more from him. So he's my dud.
I'm not even sure he's really been injured much this season, as much as he just hasn't been picked, because it's 18 appearances. It's only 7 starts, but like he has the same amount of appearances as Schlotterbeck. Like he's
I meant
been
injuries
fit.
overall. Like since he came to Dortmund, I mean,
yeah, that's fair.
General struggles.
That's fair. I just think that like the issue with that fee is more just like him not being there yet. He's just 22. Like he turned 22 within the last couple months. We'd like to see more for 25 million euros.
Yeah.
We'd like to see a player who's on pace for a little over 1,500 minutes instead of the 1,500 that Karnichuk will make us on pace for.
Well, and with that many appearances, I mean, that's more appearances and minutes than I thought he had, and I think that maybe that highlights a little bit the lack of impact. Like, there haven't been I mean, kind of like Joe Bellingham, there's not a lot of memorable moments because he like hasn't had a huge impact yet. And yeah, I mean, we would like to see more.
I think Job would have been a decent shout as well, but once again, young player, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things I will say about Karnichuk Wameka this season is last year his average minutes per appearance was like 21. He's at about 40 right now. That's much more respectable, and he's actually shown the potential that he can one day start like games for Borussia Dortmund, and he's still pre-peak. Probably as a midfielder, you'd say 2 years away from that, and there's a lot more promise in him this season than what we were seeing last year. But you would still like to see a bit more. Maybe part of the issue is him being played out of position. But then, like, you also spent 25 million euros for 25 million euros. You probably could have found a guy that is actually functionally a winger or a striker, which are the two places that Karnichuk Wameka has mainly played this year, but maybe Kovac wanted to have a midfielder playing out of position at those spots, which isn't like unheard of nowadays. I mean, look at Mikel Merino at Arsenal. My dud of the season. See, I could go Sebastian Kehl because only of every player signed this past summer, the only one on 1,000 minutes, Joe Bellingham. That's not great if you're Sebastian Kehl, considering Fabio Silva and Karnichuk Wameka both came in at a considerable fee. Aaron Anselmino came in on loan. He's been good, but like, I don't know how much we care about like the loan signing going well compared to some of the other ones. But I think I am gonna have to go with a player, and it's been a name that I've talked about negatively on this show since the inception of it, and it's Emre Can. It's 500 minutes. It's not a ton, but like,
That's why I didn't go with him, because it's like, he's been on the pitch for 5 minutes.
well, Karnichuk Wameka only got like another 200.
Yeah, and watch Emre Can get the contract extension.
Like Emre Can
well.
has 2 starts less than Karnichuk Wameka, and Emre Can has really just continued to struggle to progress the ball.
He's a fair shout.
And
I
like
think so.
there was the stat we were talking about where like the win rate with Emre Can is so far below what it is with pretty much any other Borussia
with not
Dortmund
Emre
player.
Can.
And like you look at one of the matches he played in that we won, it's 7 minutes against Villarreal. The only win he started and has actually like really contributed to, you would say, is that Borussia Mönchengladbach match, and their attack was just so bad in that performance, and I feel like they had several opportunities to counter, thanks to Emre Can's poor passing abilities in that match. So I don't know how much I want to credit him for that, or if I just want to credit the Mönchengladbach sporting director for deciding to not sign a pacey winger. Like, I don't know if we're trying to trot out 2 wingers, and it's like Frank Honorat, who's they signed at like 27 years old, is now 29, can't really run. Gio Reyna is not running in behind anytime soon. So it's like that attack just does not make a ton of sense to me. I mean, I don't know. That's me personally, but that'll be it for our negativity. Let's get back into potentially some positives, because we have some news coming out. Fabrizio Romano saying that if Manchester City sign Antoine Semenyo, Oscar Bob could leave in the winter transfer window. Borussia Dortmund is one of many teams interested. As a follow-up per build, Dortmund would sign Bob if they are able to secure departures of players like Julian Duranville and Cole Campbell. A loan with an option to buy is preferred.
So there's actually been another update with regards to that. So Julius Schomburg, who I'm sorry for mispronouncing that, but he writes for Sport One. He's basically saying that Dortmund are basically on the verge of having this happen. They're just waiting, or once Semenyo basically cements that move, which, to my understanding, from what I've been reading, should happen in the next couple days. Bob will get the green light to move to Dortmund. So it's looking more concrete actually tonight. So that's very interesting.
And we did see some rumors of a fee, I believe. Just
like
checking.
30?
30 to 35 million option.
So, according to Jack Gogan, this is a bot account on Blue Sky I'm reading off of, so I can't go on to his Twitter account to see who he writes for. So I cannot verify the quality of this source, but BVB Newsblog picked up on this, and there are a raft of suitors for Oscar Bob. Borussia Dortmund are currently top of the list and have been in negotiations over a loan move until the end of the season with a view to a permanent deal at around 30 million Great British pounds, which essentially equates to 34.4 million euros, which is the most commonly used currency to report transfer rumors. So basically we could say a little under 35 million euros there. So that 30 million Great British pounds is what Borussia Dortmund would like this to be reported of, because it's going to make us all think it's a smaller number, but it's actually a bit closer to that 35 million euro mark, which is what I would take issue with. This is very much a player with 800 senior minutes. Like we talked about signing Carney Chukwuemeka, and he hadn't played a lot, but Carney Chukwuemeka had amassed about 2,000 senior minutes over the course of about 6 seasons before signing for Borussia Dortmund, something like that. Or over the course of 4 seasons had amassed about 2,000 minutes. This is a guy with 800 minutes at all in his senior career. He has 1 assist in about 500 minutes this season, I think it is. At 35 million,
that's too much.
To sign a player with 1 assist. Why are we even including the option? I guess because if you reject the buy option, that lowers the fee in the summer. But for Borussia Dortmund, how many goal contributions would he need for you to sign him at that price in the second half of the season? Because it's not like he's starting over Kareem Adeyemi in all likelihood. You probably aren't going to play him over Maxi Bayer because he's already contracted to the club and you've already spent a ton of money on him. He's not starting over Serhou Guirassy in that striker spot. He's not starting over Julian Brandt. So how many minutes is he going to get to prove to you that he's worth that much money? And to me, that's not the case. And so then why are we including a buy option at such a high fee when, in all honesty, he's going to do middling for us?
Well, so I feel like we're a lot of what we're saying. It's it's a knowns, right? Because at the end of the day, this guy can play out wide. He can also play in midfield. Considering what we just talked about, especially with Brandt and how he's been performing better, kind of being more of a rotational player, I do see more minutes being available for a player like Bob, who can play in that attacking midfield role as well. He's a good dribbler of the ball. He adds a different element to Dortmund's play that I feel that we don't really have in any players aside from a Brandt or a Carney Chukwuemeka. Yeah, he can play out wide, but I honestly wouldn't expect to see him play out wide. There have been times where Dortmund have played with 2 10s basically behind the striker, so I see him fitting more in that sort of role possibly. But I think to answer your question about how many goal contributions, it's going to depend on his minutes. I mean, if he plays 1,000 minutes and in that time has 5 goals and 5 assists, I mean, honestly, that might justify it if they see him, being able to produce that and more in the next season. And we kind of talked about this in the chat. I feel like Dortmund scouts definitely see something in this guy, and therefore that's why like this is being done. I don't think this is haphazard. Um, so yeah, I mean, anywhere like I guess around 10 goal contributions could be the point where you start thinking about it.
I don't know. I think Borussia Dortmund need to get a bit more independent in their scouting, and stop focusing on who Manchester City and Chelsea have scouted.
Agreed with that 100% too.
Because
I agree with that too.
The issue for me isn't like the potential of Oscar Bob. Like everyone knows, if Manchester City like are giving you 500 senior minutes, you're not bad at football. Like Oscar Bob is not bad at the sport. That's not the case. The issue is for Borussia Dortmund to risk 35 million euros on a guy who at current has not shown end product. Like part of that is like Pep Guardiola has really struggled to get end product out of wingers while at Manchester City. Aside from like Riyad Mahrez, and I think there was like a season where Foden was on the wing and still scored. But like for the broad portion of these pacey wingers, there has been very little end product associated with their performances. Like you look at some of the other prospects there, you have a younger guy in Savinho who has also not shown end product. Jeremy Doku in previous seasons has not shown end product. It's gotten a bit better this year, but it's still not, I think, great in terms of the actual end product. Like this guy is at about 0.23 expected goals and expected assists per 90, which is not dissimilar to Carney Chukwuemeka for Borussia Dortmund this season, playing out of position on the wing. Like that's almost like the exact same profile right there. Like they're very similar in terms of what they're currently doing for their teams. And like Oscar Bob's potential is very, very high, but 35 million euros, like you have to be doing better there if you're Borussia Dortmund, in my opinion.
I do tend to agree. I mean, I think some of that is just because Dortmund has, I don't want to say duds necessarily, but we've had several 30 to 35 million signings in the last few years that haven't quite shown the quality that um, I, I would hope to see out of a 30 million euro or pound signing. Um, I mean, Felix Mecha was 30 million, Job was 30 million, Maxi Bayer was 30 million. Um, I mean, Chukwuemeka a little bit less than that. What I mean, I don't even remember how much Silva was now, but
Right about that
Around
25
30.
million mark.
but it
Yeah.
like it's not that long ago that we've spent, what was it, 38 million on Sebastian Haller, and that was going to be Dortmund's record signing. And like I understand that post COVID the whole market is inflated, but I also just feel like we've got to move away a bit from some of these Premier League transfers, just in the sense that like it's like the Premier League has all the money. I mean, what was working from a business standpoint is you get these guys young, and this sounds horrible out of context. You get these guys young and sell them for a huge profit when they're a little bit older after they've after they've developed, to the
Please
Premier
don't
League,
clip that.
because yes, please. To the Premier League, because the Premier League teams have so much money to spend. I mean, like, look at the size of Chelsea's bench right now. Like, they can just keep spending, and the German league isn't quite like that. And I mean, yes, Dortmund are one of the richest clubs in Germany, but there's still quite a gap between like a Dortmund and a Bayern Munich. And I feel like if we keep going for these transfers from Premier League teams, they're just gonna like milk us dry. And I mean that it starts to feel like not the best business when I mean in my opinion, in the last 12 months, our best signing has been Daniel Svensson. I think he's been the most consistent, has played a ton of minutes, and I mean I think that was 7 million and kind of came out of nowhere. I'd never heard of the guy before. So I'm kind of like what Eli said. Our scouts keep going. After the Manchester City or the Chelsea players who maybe aren't quite making it as regular first team players. Um, I just feel like we should be looking elsewhere. And I mean, that's not to say anything against Oscar Bob. I do think he's a talented player, and as a straight loan, I think he could play a role in Dortmund. I mean, my hang up there is really the price tag at the end of the day, because I don't necessarily think, like, we saw some great plays from Carney Chukwuemeka last season, but I don't necessarily think that we saw enough to justify the transfer fee, and I don't necessarily have enough faith in the Sebastian Kiel and the Dortmund board that if this isn't the best loan deal, that they're not going to pull the trigger anyway, because, well, he's already played with the team for 6 months, and we can sign him because he wants to be here. And I know that, certainly that does play a role, the player wanting to be at the club, but I mean, that's just a big price tag.
I think it's
So,
going to end up coming down to like the player justifying that price tag at the end of the day.
mhm.
Thankfully, it's not an obligation; it's just an option. Um, I would actually argue that with the Chukwuemeka signing, they might have learned a lesson there. Once again, not saying Carney's not going to do well for the club or improve or end up being a more important player, but I would hope that they would learn from experience and not want to push for something like that.
Mhm.
If, for example, Bob comes in and doesn't do, enough to justify that sort of price tag. So at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to that. But I fully agree. I don't think we should be focusing on the Premier League as the predominant market that Dortmund is looking for reinforcements for. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a bloated market. Like Manchester City has all the cards basically here, in the sense that
Yep.
they could set their price tag and either we take it or leave it at the end of the day. Because if we don't take him, a Crystal Palace will, a Sunderland will, somebody will. Like, I mean, it's kind of like what happened with James McAtee in the summer as well. I think he chose to stay in the Premier League regardless, but there's going to be suitors for these players because there are so many clubs in the Premier League that can pay those transfer fees, pay these wages, and have them, in their squads. So at the end of the day, he's going to be spoiled for choice when it comes to that regardless. If he comes to Dortmund, he will have to very much prove that he's worth that fee. The one thing I will say about, because you mentioned Daniel Svensson, obviously, very good signing. I'm a big fan of the player. I do think that kind of stuff is becoming rarer and rarer because even in leagues that aren't considered on the same level as the Bundesliga, we talked about this in the chat, even a player like Arden Jashari went for 40 million after
Yeah.
one good season
But like,
at Brugge. So it's like, at the end of the
I
day,
just hate that example because he signed the year before, and so he has an extra year left on his contract at Bruges, and also because of the Champions League.
I'm not talking about that though. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about specifically like the length of his contract because I know that plays a factor. I'm just talking about specifically based on performances. I don't know how. Like I was using in the chat, I was using Gundogan example, right? I don't remember exactly how many years he had left on his contract, but even if you take like that comparison and kind of imprint it on where the league is right now, a player like Gundogan, which is in my opinion when he was at Nuremberg, he's better than, for example, one of the players at Freiburg or excuse me, not Freiburg or Frankfurt or the other clubs that have sold players for that 50 plus fee. A player like him would go for even more. So, but that's what I'm kind of just trying to say here is like even in the lower leagues or in the leagues where I feel like in years past that sort of player would be considered a 10 million, a 15 million euro signing. That's not the case anymore. So I feel like Svensson is more and more of an outlier. I'm not saying these players don't exist. Obviously they do, but it's not as easy for Dortmund to be able to go ahead and do that. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I think like the way in which players have to be viewed as bargains has just changed. So it used to be like Gundogan came over for 5.5 million, absolute bargain, obviously. Like we scammed Nuremberg. It's okay, we can say that. And like you look at Svensson, like there's an exception there because he was, I believe, right around 22, 23 at the time. Because he's a bit older and he's still taken that extra year or two to mature in a lower league, he's so much cheaper than he would be otherwise. He also had run down his contract a bit. So you have essentially Borussia Dortmund exploiting a situation in which you have a player who's very, very good but a bit older in a weaker league, rather than you look at a player that's just signed in his prime like Yashari, um, for a team and has a very significant sample size in the Champions League, which has caused his price to go up by so much. But if you're looking at what you're getting in terms of your gamble with Oscar Bob, like Oscar Bob has less Premier League minutes in his entire career than Yashari did in the Champions League last year, probably. Just because there's so many Champions League games now that when you talk about these players, even if they're in a lower league and they're playing continental football, you can get a bigger sample size of them playing against really good clubs. Because even if you're in the Europa League, you're probably going to have a match or two against the top 5 league team. In the group stage, you're going to have a couple other good matches against Dutch teams, against Belgian teams, which are easier for you to quantify rather than like, oh, this guy's playing in Hungary, for instance. So I think there is a way of looking at it. And then from the other perspective, just in terms of the price, like, okay, maybe you're not getting a guy for like 5-10 million euros like you did with Svensson. Like, there's still like guys on the continent who are in France in the first or second tier, or in Spain in the first or second tier, that you can get in that 10 to 20 million euro range that are going to be able to project well into Borussia Dortmund and hit the ground running and be very good players. But because they're in slightly weaker leagues, instead of you paying that 35 for a guy without a sample size, you can pay 15 to 20, have a bit of a higher floor there, and get a player who has a bit more minutes under his belt, if that makes sense. And so it's not going to look like a bargain in the same way that guys did 10, 15 years ago when they're being sold for or purchased for sub 10 and sold for over 30, and you're 6xing the money. Maybe it looks more like a guy you're getting in for that 10 to 20 million euro range, and you're only going to be able to triple the money or whatever, but you'll have a better player there and a bit less of a risk because they'll have played more. They're just not contracted to a Premier League club, and that should also come with lower wages.
Oh, I 100% agree. I do.
Yeah.
Listen, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be shopping in the Premier League. It is out of our budget at the end of the day for the type of player that we're looking for. Like, that is clear as day to anybody. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm hoping for the best. If he does come, I do hope that he performs to
Oh,
a
me
point
too.
where that sort of fee, if they end up going and paying that fee, that it's justified, and he does end up being a consistent fixture for the club. So yeah, we'll see what happens at the end of the day. It's an option, thankfully. So
Next up, we have Estadio Deportivo. Sevilla are looking for affordable reinforcements for their team, and Julian Duranville, who's available on loan, could be considered a candidate.
Oh, so Duranville is finally fit enough to play, and now we're talking about loaning him. Like, come on, Dortmund.
I mean, it makes complete sense. Like, not in the sense that I agree with it, but in the sense of like how we've been like structuring, or not how we've been, but how Dortmund
yeah.
have been structuring this team. Like, you get rid of a player that predominantly plays wide, that's not going to get minutes, and then you get a player like Bob to come in, right, where he can play as an attacking midfielder or whatever. So, I mean, from their logistical standpoint, it might make sense. Do I think it's a good idea? Hell no. I think this is a very talented player that should possibly be getting more minutes with us. But at the end of the day, from the more we read, I guess, which once again, take everything with a grain of salt, right? He's not performing properly in training.
Yep.
There have been all these injury and growth issues. Like, I don't even know exactly the details of that anymore. But there's always been some sort of excuse, I feel like, for him to not play. So at the end of the day, if he's not going to play here, yeah, I mean, have him go on loan to Sevilla. Hopefully that doesn't, end up being another situation like Alexander Isak or something like that, or Mikel Merino. But sometimes it isn't the right place and right time for a player at a club, as those two players that I just mentioned kind of, illustrate. So I don't know at this point. I want him to succeed at Dortmund. Do I see it happening right now? No, because of what's going on. So
For sure. I mean, I think with all of Duranville's injury issues and, I mean, lack of game time, I mean, you do want to see what's best for the player too. And kind of like what you said, Brian, if he's not going to play, then I guess I would like to see him play somewhere if there is a potential future for him at the club. Because even if he is fit, he's not going to get minutes under Niko Kovac, and I think we've seen that even in just the last month or so, where there have been opportunities to play a couple young guys from the bench, and we just don't see it. I mean, I think he even said in a press conference before it was the last game of the Hinrunde, that Filippo Mane was going to be an option from the bench, and very much alluded to the fact that he was going to use him, and then I don't think he did. Or if he did, it was probably for a minute in stoppage time that I don't even remember. Um, but yeah, I do think Duranville is talented, and I mean, this might be a way to for Dortmund to cut their losses a little bit and maybe see if the guy does have as much potential as we all have thought he has.
So last year, he had about 289 league minutes and had about 0.18 expected goals and assists per 90. That's not really playable. And this isn't to say the player doesn't have a future because he's still only 19. But if the player is desperate for game time and is kicking up a fuss over it, he needs to go on loan because you can't have that in the dressing room. And he hasn't merited playing time for Borussia Dortmund. Part of that is luck because of his injuries. He was a fairly cheap gamble at 6.5 million euros. But like, I don't know how you justify playing him. Like, Cole Campbell's a different situation for me, but Julian Duranville, like, he just lacked any end product last year. He lacked it in the third tier. He lacked it in the top flight in limited game time. He looked very good in one match against Barcelona, and that was a very open match that was very much end to end, and that suited him, and that was great for him. But like in games with any form of structure, he has struggled. And that's not to say that in 3 years he's not looking like a Mikel Merino or an Alexander Isak who's left Borussia Dortmund and gone to better things. But like part of that is just the timing and the mentality. And the timing has not worked out. He may not be in the right mental space to succeed at Borussia Dortmund. And hopefully we do a better job of loading him out and keeping him happy enough to return if he does mature into a better player, or getting some type of suitable fee for him elsewhere. If you loan him out, I would really try to get a 1 year extension just because there is the potential there. So that way you can ensure you get the sell on whatever value back. But let's move on to our last story. Real Madrid is reportedly planning talks with Borussia Dortmund about a swap deal for Nico Schlotterbeck, which could result in Diego Aguado, never heard of him, and Gonzalo Garcia moving to the, also never heard of him, moving to the German club. The Royals want to pay a transfer fee of, sorry. This is my first time reading this. Live reaction. This is hilarious. 30 to 35 million euros to finalize that deal.
Plus two players we've never heard of. Swap deals aren't a real thing. They never actually happen.
This is like, oh my god, this is someone's creative writing project for like college, and they deserve a doctorate for this. Because who's coming up with like these two guys that probably have under 300 senior minutes between the two of them?
Build, stop using ChatGPT.
Like 55 million euros. Like,
yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, either way, I don't think it makes sense. Even if it were something that were to be reality, you're basically, trading away what would be, or who is one of the best defenders in Europe for two unproven talents, and basically, like a quarter, I would say, of his value as a whole. So I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me, but I found it fairly amusing, so I wanted to put that in for you guys. I'm glad you guys had a giggle from it.
I mean,
we did.
We can't even get Victor Valdepenas. Like, he's at least played first team minutes. I'm trying to see if these guys have even made a La Liga squad, and they're not listed on FBref, so it's not looking like they have. But like, we can't get Arda Güler back. Like, we can't get I don't know, like a guy who can make the squad. Like I don't even know how to say this.
I'd take Alonso. Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Listen,
They're still holding on to that one.
For now.
we can't get Camavinga. He's got 500 minutes. 23 years old. You think he's happy with 500 minutes? Like, he might actually be worth the swap. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they'd want to do something that beneficial for us. but I
No,
digress.
of course not.
But, like, Camavinga's only got 500 minutes for him. It's not like he's playing and he's 23. It's not like he's still 18. So he might have a say in that. I don't think he'd want to go to us. I think he'd have some options that would be willing to pay him more. But if we're talking about reducing the price by, like, I was being conservative at 55 million euros, like, we're potentially talking about like 65, 70 million euro reduction. Like, that fit is right in line with what I think Camavinga's worth to them.
Yeah, time will tell. I mean, listen, this whole Schlotterbeck thing is becoming more and more dubious. I mean, the more comments he makes, recently he was like, "Yeah, I want to win a Bundesliga title or whatever," and it's like, obviously, you want him to be able to do that here. The media is going to obviously speculate as to what he means by that. No pen to paper as of yet, so it's getting a little bit more dubious. I want to hold out hope. I want to keep hope alive and say he will sign still, but I guess we'll see. But at the end of the day, we'd be better off just getting a fee for him, if anything, and looking for our own options than taking two, like you said, two Real Madrid players that haven't even seen first team football yet. So
Totally agree. But, like my Rückrunde wish list. Come on, new contract. Schlotterbeck, let's go.
Sorry, I'm just Googling these guys. Like, I'm trying to... Are they real? Okay, Diego Aguado is 18. Playing for Castilla. I mean...
my whole thing is like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, like, their academy as a whole just hasn't produced much as of late. Am I mistaken in saying that? Like, I feel like majority, like, they bring in most of their talent. I can't think of a single player that's kind of come through. Like, did Valverde come through? I don't think he did.
I thought he did. I think he spent some time there, but I think you would say Ashraf Hakimi is probably the number one gem. They have Brahim Diaz there, who, like, he left and he came back.
But wasn't he in City's academy for a while?
Yeah, he was in, I think he was in theirs, and then he went to City's, and then he came back, and then he was in Milan, and, like, Real Madrid, if you look at some of the names that have spent time in their academy, like, they have a lot of good players that have played there. But, like, it's probably the third or fourth best academy in Spain, I want to say. They have really good Spanish players that play there, and a big part of that is just because, like, if you're that rich, you can spend the money on them. Asensio, I think, came through their academy. Gonzalo Garcia is 21. He's got, like, a couple minutes for the first team. But, like, it's not like we're taking their premier guys. I don't know.
That makes sense to me, but figured it'd be entertaining.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that'll do it for us. So have a good one. Actually, nope. We're not done. Make sure you rate us 5 stars, like and subscribe, all that stuff. Follow us on Spotify. We really appreciate your support, and thank you guys all for tuning in. And now you can have a good one.
And have a happy new year. We'll see you in 2026.
Jadon Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce out. Another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond
Jetzt
compare.
kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Inzo an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!